Hi, welcome to Android. Today we will be covering about Traveler Assistant version 1.1. And the concepts to cover is user interaction via buttons and menus. So goal for this project, add various buttons and menus in main screen and play with it. But most important thing is that how do we add the code so that we can understand and interact with these buttons and menus. So for that, the step one is add couple of buttons in XML layout of main screen activity. Organize the buttons placement. So I think we have done these two already in the previous session. What we have not done is step 3, add code inside main screen activity to handle click event of the button. Create menus using XML. Add code inside main screen activity to handle click event of the menu. Then we'll test the buttons and menus. And then there is another way to create menus, one menu using XML and another menu using Android APIs. So there are two different ways to create menu in the screen, and then we'll test if the menus are working properly or not. So the idea is very basic and simple. Learn about creating buttons and menus in a Android screen or activity. So let us start with that. Now in Android, handling user interaction events means that somebody will press a key. Key is that keypad button on the phone. Screen touches the screen, clicks the button, so or clicks the menu as well. So this one is basically button clicks or menu clicks. Okay, button clicks or menu clicks. So this is what we are going to discuss about. Android exposes several virtual event handlers listed here that let you interact with the user input. But there are two ways to do this. Either you can use the standard set of listener methods invoked for each event in an activity, or you can define a listener class or method for each view like button. So either you can define your own listener classes, and listener classes are a concept which comes from Java, where you define a small listener class which will handle the interaction for the button. So these are the various topics we'll be discussing today. Now let us see that these are the various topics. Now by default in Android, each activity has a listener methods called OnKeyDown, OnKeyUp, OnTrackBall event, OnTouch event, Motion event, OnBackPress. So these are the various things which are there in this one. Now before we get into this one, let me just explain you that what happens. So every time somebody will do something, there is a click happens, click, whether through button or through menu. In both the case, there are two ways to handle. One way is called using predefined listener methods. listener methods, and other is define a listener class. Let us put it new listener class. So you have to create this listener class. So depending on how you want to handle it, either you can use the predefined listener methods or you can define a new listener class. And then you can capture that click event of a button and menu, and you can do whatever business logic you want to put it. So that is what it basically means. Now these are the predefined listener methods. These are predefined listener methods in the activity class itself. So you have to just implement this method on key down. This get triggered when any device key is pressed and not handled by any of the views inside of the activity. So if any of the view is not having its own listener event, listener class, then on key down get triggered. How is on key up is triggered? When a user releases a pressed key and not handled by any of the views inside of the activity. Now, if you are not very clear about this line, think about this. Okay? So let us assume that there is an activity, and in this activity there is a button. Okay? Now two possibilities is there. Either this button has its own listener methods, listener class, sorry, or it has predefined method in the activity. Sorry, this is in the activity. So the activity has here on key down. Now what happens is that if a button is clicked, then first it will check does it have its own listener class or not. If there is configured its own listener class, then this get triggered and the responsibility to do the business logic based on the button click goes to this one. But if this is not there, then the responsibility to this, it will check is there a on key down method implemented here. If it is implemented, then it will go to this one. So that's all the Android does, the logic building, that first try to check the listener class. If not, then go to the on key down method and do whatever logic is put here. So that's all pretty much what the logic of delegating the click event happens. And these are the various methods which you can implement into your activity. One of the most important method here, what you will find, which is not directly related to clicking, which is used very frequently, is this one, OnBackPress. So this one, let us assume you want to write a screen, and whenever somebody presses the back button, you want to do something. Then that logic you should put it inside the OnBackPress method. And all of these methods are put inside the activity window here itself. Let me just show you. And this one. Yeah. So if I come here and say on back pressed. Now another thing, if you want to know that, we know that this is activity class. So on back pressed will come here. Now whatever logic you want to put here, you should put it here. Okay. Now, before, in fact, there is one more very important thing which I should explain it here, and that is the very basic code structure of the activity itself. Now, let me just explain you a little bit this part. What is the meaning of these classes, methods, and structure, basic structure. So we'll come back to the buttons and menu. So hang around, don't worry. So this is your Java code or Android code, right? In this Android code, it starts with the package com isaac ta, and then there is a all these imports are here. Most important thing is that this is the activity class. This is the super class for all activity. Okay, so you should always extend this guy to create any new activity. So if you want to create a new activity, you should always say public class, some class name extends activity. Now, when you do this, there are a lot of methods which are in the activity class which get inherited to your class. And one of those classes could be like this. You see this override? It means that this has come from the superclass. This has come from the superclass. So what generally we do is that when we write a new activity, we extend the superclass base class, superclass for all activity, but it is not a superclass like object in the Java. Object is still the superclass of all the classes in Java, in Android. But here activity is the base class for developing any activity. So on create, on backpress. Now a activity must have on create method. So this is on create method is must. And the second thing is that you should always call this super.onCreate. In Java world, this super.onCreate is not mandatory to call a super class method, but in Android, especially for onCreate and all the lifecycle stages which are there, requires that it must be created. Now, here it also brings to an important concept that what is activity lifecycle. So let us spend a little bit time on activity lifecycle. We'll talk about activity lifecycle as well. We'll talk about how the structure of the code will look like, and we'll also talk about menus and button. Now, this is the starting point. This is also the starting point. It is must, and this is it is also the starting point of executing your activity. So when your activity is launched by Android, it starts running here. Okay, so just be clear that in Java you might have seen there is a method called main method, and in that main method the execution starts. But in Android, whenever a screen is launched, it starts with onCreate. There are few things which we have to do, and let me just comment out this one or delete for the time being to reduce the clutter. So there are few things will happen. First, activity, or rather blank activity, created. When you call the onCreate is created. Now what is this? What happens at this stage? Loads the UI layout. Okay, and then we'll do something here to create objects for various views, also called widgets, also called controls of UI, like button, text box. For all of these we'll create objects. Okay, and then that is step 1. Step 1 is this one, step 2 is this one, step 3 is this one. Step 4, what we'll do is that we'll put logic to handle click. So let me just walk through this, how the structure of the logic. First, onCreate is called when blank activity is created. Then set content view, there is a method coming from the superclasses which loads the UI layout file, and that is done by r.layout.main. So what is this? This is nothing but the same thing which you see here, this one. This main.xml. So this is the main.xml which is getting loaded at this point. Now this main.xml file, this UI layout, that is this XML and the corresponding representation get loaded inside this file called traveler assistant activity.java. So what you are doing is basically you are pretty much trying to load this XML file here. Okay. Now by doing that, you are trying to load that layout. And next thing what we'll do is that we'll create the objects for all the elements which are there in that layout. So what are the various layouts I am interested in? So what I am going to do is that I am going to create an object for this, this, and this in Java, in this class. So that is what is my next responsibility. And for that, I am going to write the code. So let us start with the coding few things. What we'll do is that we'll declare those variables here. So button, you can name it as login_button, and another one is cancel_button. Now this one is, we have to just adjust the import, and then we have to use text view and edit text. Now in this one, this control is called text view, this control is called edit text. So we'll use edit text. Edit text called et username underscore et comma password underscore et. So we have declared some variable for button and text. Now we have to create those button and text, right? So what I am going to do here is that equals to find view by id r.id dot button 1. I will just explain you, don't worry. Let me just type first. So basically what I am doing here is that I am creating the login button object based on this. But I did not use that new thing. Everybody knows about in Java, when you create object, you have to use new. But where is that new? Nowhere. Then how does it work? Basically, when you do r.id dot, it will pop up all those. These are the IDs which you have seen in your. So just hang on. I'm going to explain this line because this is very important. Now, what exactly is I did it? I did not do anywhere new button, new edit text. I'm doing something little different. That is not the way people write code in Java for creating objects. What we did is that in a typical way, you would think that to create a button, you would say that something like login button equals to new button, okay, and then you create the object. But here I am not doing that. What exactly happening is that there is something very interesting happening behind the scene, and what that means is that at this stage itself, all the objects which you saw in the screen, let me just show you again, all the objects which you saw in the screen, this user ID, this object, this and this. For all of these, Android creates an object and keep it in memory ready already at this state. Sorry. So what it means is at this stage itself, all objects of UI layout is created and loaded in memory. So that's why you don't need to create those objects, because Android has already done for you. What exactly you have to do is that just get a reference to that object which is already created in the memory. And how do I get a reference to that? Very simple. This is the ID of that view or widget or control. Okay. This is method to search. And what this does is that find view by ID gets you a reference to the object which was already created and loaded in memory. And the only thing you need to do is that casting. Okay. So by doing this, what Android has done is that it makes your life easier and don't create that object again and again. Okay. Or make any mistake. So they have a much better optimized way to create those objects. So let me just explain. What we did here is that we have r.id.button1, which is the ID. Find view by ID is a method to search an object with this ID and then cast it into a object type called button and put that reference into login underscore button. So now I have all the 4 objects in a local variable called these. Okay. Once I have all of this, the next thing is very simple, and that is how to attach some kind of a click event or any logic into all of this. Okay. Any question? So let us go with that. Next thing what we are going to see is that how does, let us just arrange these things little nicely. Once we have this, let us put the logic that of few other things. I want to now do something. So what I will do is that I will create a listener class, and for that what you could do is that you can say either login underscore button dot add listener. Sorry, set there is a listener method. There is a method for adding the listener. So and that is set on key listener. So what we are going to do is that we can create a new method class called OnKeyListener and add it here. So that is one approach you can take it. So you can create here a OnKeyListener object and put it here. There is another way you can do is that instead of creating an OnListener method here, you can declare that this class itself implements OnKeyListener. Okay. So OnClickListener. And then it will say add unimplemented methods. What it brings that is there's something called onClick. So let us move this guy a little up here. Now, by doing this, what you are saying is that whenever a method onClick is created, a button is clicked on this, this method will get triggered. Now, this can happen for either of the button, login button or cancel button, because in all the cases you can do. Now, if you want to attach a different listener, then you can do a different approach. So there are various approaches here possible, but I don't want to confuse people. So what I would do is that to start with, I will make it very simple, and I will say like this: login underscore button dot set OnClickListener, and I will say this. Okay. Now what this means is that this object works as a listener class as well because of implementing OnClickListener method interface. So we know that when an interface is implemented by a class, then that class acts as an object for this interface. So now this class becomes also an object which is implementing this interface. So here you have to do OnClickListener and then do this and put the logic what happens here at the time of doing anything. So what we will check is that now since there is a single method which is getting triggered by both the button, first we'll do check if v dot get id equals to r dot id dot button 1. Okay. If it is true, then there is a class called toast. And what is toast? Toast is a very useful, important method which is used for displaying some simple message on any screen. Basically, toast says pop-up, a small pop-up. Any point you want to do a small pop-up, this is a very good thing. Now, first thing it takes is that context, which is nothing but get base context. So don't worry about this get base context text. Let us assume I will say, hey, you clicked login button. Okay, and then this is the duration. How does this works? This works like this: toast dot and duration length, long or short. Let us give long, and then in the end it will say so like this, and then this one. So basically now we have done with a login button. We said set OnClickListener this, and we said implements OnClickListener, and we put the logic here. If the button which view is clicked has a ID called button 1, then do this. Else since we have only 2 buttons, so we don't have to worry about cancel button. Okay. So let us see this code once more. Okay. So this is our code. Now by doing this, let us run this one. And again, keep watching this guy. If everything is going fine or not on the console screen. So far looks fine. So let us go back and go to this one. Now here I have put something for login, something for cancel. So let us click this button, login. And it says, hey, you click login button. Now I click cancel. And nothing happened. Here you click login button. Now when I say cancel, nothing is happening. When I say login, it is working. Why it is that? Now let us see. If v.getID equals to r.id button 1, do this, else do this. Now we need to just figure out what happened here. Yes, the reason why it is not working is not because of this code. Very interesting. Why? It is not that this code is wrong. This code is fine. The problem is I have not attached this listener object for the cancel button. This cancel button need to be added for this one. Here. So once I associate the cancel button, so now my listener class, now this cancel button also has a listener, because if a button does not have a listener, then this method is of no use. So now I am saying that do this and then click this one. Okay, and I will say okay, go ahead and launch. Now both of the button have this same listener, so this code get triggered on both the button when get clicked. Earlier this code was getting triggered only when login button was there. Okay, so now let us see this. I want to check whether that console everything is fine. Yes, it looks everything fine. So go back here. Now again see login. Hey, you click login button. Cancel. Hey, you click cancel button. So now what happens is that both the buttons I have connected to this listener class by using this method, and this logic get triggered for both the cases, and depending on what button get clicked, you can put the logic. So these are the views based all of this. Now that brings us to important concept that if you want to put any interaction on a button, you can use this way. Okay. Now what we'll see is that next how to do menus and handle the menu event. But before I get into the menu, let us get and understand a little bit about what is menu and how to create menu and all those things.